Courage can appear in many forms and from unexpected places. Today, courage comes to us from a suburb in Los Angeles, California, in the form of a student who's taking a stand against government corruption and corporate greed. In April of 2023, our guest, Marielle Williamson, planned to hold an event for fellow students at Eagle Rock High School about the benefits of plant milks and highlight the consequences of dairy milk consumption and production. However, the school's administration informed her she could only promote the benefits of plant milks if she did so for dairy milk too, citing a federal law stating any information that could directly or indirectly restrict the sale or marketing of cow's milk on school campuses is prohibited. So on May 2nd of this year, a lawsuit was filed against her school district and the USDA on Marielle's behalf for violating her First Amendment rights. We are really thrilled to have such an extraordinary human with us today to share her remarkable story and discuss this hugely important topic. Welcome, Marielle.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We've been following the story like from day one. And I think emailed you almost immediately when you come on the podcast to talk about this, because this is our jam here at Switch4Good. Mostly we deal with milk and dairy. We deal with all of it, but our origination as a organization and nonprofit started somewhat similarly to your journey, where we were fighting back up against the powers that be that try to talk us into and lie to us that cow's milk is good for us. So before we dive into the details of the case and your activism, which is just so interesting, I'd love to start with a question for you about your generation. And I'm going to admit, as much as our generation, Alexandra and my generation, seems to sometimes roll our eyes at Gen Z's maybe short attention span, desire to be rewarded quickly, and addiction to technology, I find that many Gen Zs are also highly inquisitive, like you, and question the status quo on a regular basis. My generation, it's when I look back, it's like, how in the world did we think that way? But we just pretty much simply believed what advertising told us. And the Got Milk campaign started in 1993, and I was 20 at the time. And they started that campaign after 2 decades of declining milk sales. So people were already kind of winding down from drinking cow's milk. And they spent $34 million a year of our tax dollars on a campaign to basically make milk cool. That was the whole goal. And we didn't ask any questions at all. I mean, we were all like, oh, okay, that's it. Yeah, got milk, maybe whatever, we'll drink it. This makes sense. And we just took it all hook, line, and sinker. But your generation doesn't seem to be buying what advertising is selling these days. And you guys ask questions and you dig in and you don't seem to accept things at face value, especially you. And so I'm wondering, I want to ask you kind of like, what makes you, Marielle, want to ask more questions and not just believe all the milk hype?
Well, when you break it down, milk is the secretion a mother of another species produces when pregnant for her baby. We're told to stop drinking human milk after what, two years old, maybe? I don't know, actually. But after a certain age, and then we're told to start drinking the breast milk of the mother of a different species. It doesn't make sense. And I think seeing it in its raw product, with the amount of alternatives we have in this day and age, it makes the connection for myself and my peers a lot easier to see. We see that we're not meant to be drinking this. And I think that's why dairy is not as popular nowadays. Or I guess milk is not as popular. I think cheese and yogurt and other products are following along slowly, but milk is just the raw and real products, and we don't want that. It's gross.
What made you peel back the layers on that, though? Because there's a lot of people who just, they don't come out of the womb like, wait a minute, we drink milk from our own mother, and then they don't really go through that process in their heads. historically anyway.
I didn't go through it till I was in my, 30s. I didn't really
Right.
realize how weird it was.
Yeah, well, I was vegetarian for a long time, since I was 9, I think, just because I didn't like the concept of eating an animal when I had the privilege of accessing alternatives. And I came across a TED Talk by Ed Winters on the ostrich effect, where he talked about how when we're faced with troubling information that requires us to change, we look away and we bury our heads in the sand like ostriches. And he talked about our food system and animal cruelty. And I learned that the reasons I didn't want to eat meat were the same reasons that I shouldn't be eating dairy. It's the same industry. And so I decided to stop eating dairy and then later other animal products. And I became very passionate about this. And I just finished high school, but in high school, I was an international baccalaureate student. And it's essentially a 2-year program where each subject has essays and each subject has a very big essay type project you do. And so I dedicated my history one to researching how dairy became so mainstream. And so I was able to learn about Got Milk and the National School Lunch Program and subsidies and all of that. And it was just like, it was so shocking and horrifying. And then I dedicated my theory of knowledge paper on researching the environmental impact of some animal products and alternatives. And that combined with, learning about the equity issues, racial issues through internships, like with Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, I just really learned how messed up dairy is. And I wanted to talk about it with students. And in trying to talk about it and being told I couldn't unless I also promoted it, I was able to learn even more, just more about the stronghold the dairy industry has over schools participating in the National School Lunch Program.
Can you tell us how, you've mentioned it several times and Dotsie mentioned it, National School Lunch Program. Tell us what that is.
The main lunch program that schools in the United States participate in. And I think they get, I think it's cheaper. They get access to, cheaper meals, which is better for students. But at the same time, it's regulated by the USDA, which works with the dairy industry. And so there's a lot of funding and a lot of subsidies. And it's kind of all covered up by, this is healthy for you. This has X nutrients and X vitamins. When in reality, it's just kind of a way to promote these products that are subsidized.
Yeah. It might help to add some clarity to the history of it for our listeners, but I think you'd be interested too, Marielle, for sure. I was, because I think that the general intentions of the beginning of the National School Lunch Program were probably good. The school lunch program started right after World War II, and it really was born because during the war, the United States was feeding a lot of Allied forces, a lot of Allied armies, and dairy was one of those products of food, if you will, in quotes. And so when the war ended, we suddenly had a gigantic surplus of commodities because we weren't feeding the Allied forces anymore, Allied armies. So Truman and the House of Representatives created the National School Lunch Program really to serve as a place to dump these commodities. But I do believe that the intention seemed to be at the time, standing up for dairy farmers, because the government had asked the dairy farmers to step up in a big way during the war and feed all of these soldiers. And so now I think they felt like they, had to help them back and keep them in business, keep their businesses going. And I think probably at the time, milk seemed like it was nutritious. They didn't really know anything. So it seemed like it was good enough. And then here we are, right? How many years later? And 80, and we haven't really asked too many questions about this lunch program or the USDA, or the fact that so many of our tax dollars are being fed into subsidizing the dairy industry. And I don't even think until you brought this up that we haven't really asked the question how crazy it is that the USDA mandates that schools must not directly or indirectly restrict the sale or marketing of fluid milk at any time or in any place on school premises or at school sponsored events. I mean, that's like, it just hasn't been brought to light, right? People just haven't discussed it. And now we are, and now we can stand up and now we can have a conversation. So I think, like some things, not all things, it was developed with good intentions, but now we know so much more, and your generation is asking these questions.
Yeah, definitely.
That was why when you wanted to promote, when you wanted to have a table promoting plant milks and not consuming dairy, the administration at your school had to say to you that if you did have that table, then you needed to also promote milk. Tell us a little bit about that. That was because of that rule that Dotsie was just talking about.
Yeah, well, actually, technically, that rule wouldn't even allow that. My principal is a great principal. He really values student voice. He's a big advocate for the First Amendment, but he was restricted by this federal law. And we went back and forth a bit. He wanted to allow me to do this thing, but he didn't want to get in trouble with the administration, the district. And so this was kind of his compromise. But ultimately, the posters that I was provided with to hand out were posters that I was criticizing, or that I wanted to criticize in my day of action. Posters like got milk posters, but posters funded by that campaign. You know, with a glass of milk in the middle, stating all the nutrients. You know, one glass of milk has this much protein, this much whatever, and I wasn't gonna hand that out while also criticizing it. So
yeah, it doesn't make sense. What is the pro dairy milk advertising look like? I know that it has greatly increased, because when I was in high school, we didn't hear about it over the loudspeaker and announcements. And I mean, there were probably some posters, but not that I really recognize or remember. I mean, it wasn't so, it's almost as if they are aware how unpopular milk is with your generation. And so it's like they're just ramming it down your throat. What is it like in school? Like, is it on the morning announcements? Like, what do they say? What do you see? What is it? What are they trying to do inside your school to make milk popular?
So when you walk into the cafeteria, there's posters promoting milk. There's pictures of milk. There's those pyramid and plate posters. There's also posters like the ones I was asked to hand out as well, which were, like I said, you know, the amount of nutrients in one glass of milk. But more importantly, when you go in the lunch line, milk it catches your eye. It's colorful. There's you know, pink, purple, blue, green, brown, and it's all laid out, and it looks pretty and it's eye-catching. And you look at the other things, the main meal even, which is just brown, wrapped in brown paper. The vegetable, it's just kind of pushed in a corner. And then the plant-based milk, which I'm lucky that my school offers plant-based milk, but there's only like 2 or 3 of them. They run out like that. And they're also
2 or 3 cartons, or 2 or 3 kinds of milk, plant milk?
Cartons.
Oh my gosh. For all hundreds of you.
Yeah. And even then it's hidden. I say hidden. I don't know if it's intentional or not. It's behind all of the colorful cow's milk. behind like a wall where only the cafeteria person can go around and open it and grab you yours. And you can only get it if you have a doctor's note or a medical note stating that you have a medical condition signed by a doctor or parent. And so, and students don't even know this is an option. And then you mentioned the loudspeaker in the morning. Our cafeteria, our announcements list out the cafeteria options, and they finish by saying, and we have got milk. And then you look at our LAUSD summer and regular menus, and it all says got milk. And then at the bottom, it says all the different kinds of milk we have. It doesn't say that we have soy milk, which is our plant-based milk option. It doesn't say that, it doesn't even say what our vegan option is, which we don't always have, but and not all LAUSD schools have, but it's just not in the menu. Students don't know it's there. And you never realize how intentional all of this is until you learn about the dairy industry, really.
Right.
And then it's scary, like just walking into the cafeteria, really probably any LAUSD cafeteria, any school cafeteria that participates in the National School Lunch Program. There's just so much attention on dairy. If I were trying to hold a tabling event discussing, plant-based meat options or vegan chicken nuggets or anything, I wouldn't be restricted. It's the dairy industry, really.
And I heard you mention, I thought this was really poignant, that because kids need to have either a doctor's note or a note signed by their parents that they can't take dairy milk and therefore need an alternative, it's labeling being lactose intolerant a disability, essentially. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, students of color are more affected by lactose intolerance. There's much higher rates, and that says something. And this was mentioned in the press release from the Physicians Committee that sends a message to students. It's like this product is being pushed onto students who cannot digest it and who have shown time and time again that they want an alternative. The alternative is just not there. And I spoke about this back in September with the LAUSD head nutritionist, and I was hoping to do a collaboration with a really big oat milk company and LAUSD, and she told us that the oat milk didn't meet the nutritional requirements to be equivalent as a dairy alternative.
Right.
But
soy milk does. So it's almost the exact same mirror of macronutrients, which is why the dietary guidelines included it as an alternative into the new, the latest version of the guidelines in 2020.
Yeah.
So we have the alternative for them. I'm curious, the dietitians, we know the dietitian said no on the oat milk, not the right macronutrients. But did the dietitian happen to comment on the fact that so many children of color are anywhere from 70 to 95% lactose intolerant, and the symptoms of lactose intolerant and how that could greatly affect your learning potential when you're sitting in school and your stomach's gurgling and you're sneezing and wheezing and you feel like you have to fart and that's embarrassing. I mean, all of it.
Yeah, well, she said what a lot of administration staff has said to me, which is that they agree with all the problems associated with dairy and they want to advocate for more plant-based milk, but it's out of their control. Even a district nutritionist does not have control over milk in schools. That is the USDA regulations.
Nancy, do you have some money or some facts and figures here about the power of the dairy industry and its investment in this kind of thing in schools?
Well, they're not investing anything. They're alive because of our money. It's the government that is, it's almost like we went in way too deep a long time ago. And now here's where we still are. The dairy industry they would go under, I think, almost overnight if they didn't have all the subsidies, right? We know that's why milk is so cheap at the grocery store compared to soy milk or oat milk, or even lactose-free milk is 3 times what regular milk is. So their lobbyists are certainly powerful. They're really trying to keep this status quo in place. And in fact, when we introduced the Add Soy Act, now 2 months ago in the House of Representatives, led by Representative Troy Carter and Representative Nancy Mace, bipartisan bill. About a month later, a bill was introduced to bring full fat milk back into schools, because it's 2%, right? And that's what is in the dietary guidelines. As the dietary guidelines became more and more aware of how harmful saturated fat was over the years, they switched it from whole milk to 2%, and then the schools followed. So there is a bill to add whole milk, because the bill says that children aren't drinking as much milk because they don't like the way it tastes, because it tastes like dirty water, I think is how they allude to it. So if they had whole milk, the kids would be taking it, because we know that kids are not drinking it, right? We know that. And I can repeat this, the waste stat from 2019 that the USDA did on the program itself, and 29.8% of the cartons of milk in all of the public schools, so that's 51 million children, threw away, 30% of them, 29.8, threw away these milk cartons completely untouched. So they either don't like it or they know it makes them feel bad. So this extraordinary amount of waste, we're looking at what is the alternative that they won't throw away, because that's the National School Lunch Program we spend about $1 billion a year. So that's almost $300 million of our tax dollars lit on fire, because they're just tossing it in the trash. So they say there's a bill that says bring whole milk. And then, I don't know, a week ago, maybe, there is a bill now. Yeah, it's very recent. It just came across my desk like 6 days ago, to bring flavored milk back into schools. So you can really see the power of the dairy lobby in conjunction with the USDA. They're fighting our bill. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that within the 6 weeks that we brought the bill for soy milk to be added into school lunch program, that these two bills have emerged.
Dotsie mentioned how many children are throwing away their milk cartons. What do your friends in high school feel about milk? What do they know about milk? And how are they living their lives, in terms of their diet and milk?
So most people I know my age, most of my peers, don't drink cow's milk in its whole form. They eat cheese, they eat other forms of dairy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like cow's milk. They're grossed out by it. In the campaign I held in October, the support was overwhelming. Every single person that participated and filled out my survey, and I'd say over 300 people participated, said that they wanted to see plant-based milk in our cafeterias as an option. Every single person, and that's all students. My school is grades 7 through 12, and those are students of all ages. They all wanted to see that. And even when I presented that data to the district nutritionist, to a USDA representative for California, they all said, this is great. We love to see student voice. We love to see student demand. There's nothing we can do. And so it's crazy. It's like students want this, and yet the dairy industry is stronger, I guess.
Why is it? Because they don't like the taste of milk, or they recognize the environmental, the cruelty? What aspects are most sticking with them?
Well, there are a lot of environmental groups and environmentalists at my school. I think environment is part of it. I don't think, unfortunately, ethics are a big part of it, but I think human rights are a large part of it. And I have a friend who, for a while, we have great conversations. We have a lot of different perspectives, and she's told me time and time again that she doesn't really care about the ethics of veganism, And yet she read the LA Times article and she came up to me in tears and she was like, I had no idea how interconnected this was with equity and human rights. And I'm motivated to eat more plant-based. And since she sent me pictures of like, she's gone out to Burger King and tried the Beyond Burger or Impossible Whopper, I think it is. And so it's great. And I mean, it's having so many different areas to show how bad dairy is, you know, the environment, ethics, human rights, human health, just goes to show that we don't need this product in our cafeterias. On the contrary, we need it out. And we need an alternative, even if it's water. This is not healthy and students don't want it.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
As I started really digging into this, Marielle, probably a couple of years ago, and just understanding how this all got put in place in the first place. And side note, it's the Richard B. Russell National School Act was passed in 1946 on June 4th. And so everything that we're doing now and that anybody's trying to do that has to do with the National School Lunch Program is an amendment to that. So our bill is putting forth an amendment to that school that adds soy milk in right alongside dairy milk so that kids have a choice. But as I dug into it deeper, I started looking at the breakfast and lunch program, which is a free program for underserved communities and children. And I started looking at, the nutrition, which, it's almost void of, as we know it, when you go through the school lunch line, you can tell us what you see in, but we know there's plenty of pizza and French fries and milk. But these kiddos that are underserved may not get dinner when they go home. So they are relying on the school to provide what could be, not in all cases, obviously, but what could be their only nutrition of the day. And you spoke of privilege earlier, and I think it's a really important point, because those of us of privilege, can drink one of all 17 plant milks in any given moment of any given, whatever we want to make, coconut milk smoothie, or, almond milk on our cereal, or ice cold roast rice milk. We have all these options, and we have it sometimes, not all the time. But I do think it's important that the school provides nutrition to the kids that really need it. And so in my opinion, that would be why you wouldn't offer water only, right? There's no nutrients there. Like, we need to be able to provide something that does have the macronutrient profile of dairy, because it's a pretty awesome macronutrient profile, because it's literally built and made to grow a baby. So of course there's a lot of good things for it, for a growing cow, but it has a really nice, just balance of macronutrients, and those kids need that. So we get a lot of I would say flack and emails at Switch for Good, like, why soy milk? Why just soy milk? Why not almond milk? Why not oat milk? And we have a document that really goes into each milk, right? And oat milk, almost no protein. Coconut milk, almost 40% fat. So if that was something that someone was taking in every day, if it was oat milk, they wouldn't be getting enough protein. Or if it was coconut milk, right? That is way too much fat to be in one glass, according to the dietary guidelines anyway. So I think it is important to look at what the privileged students have access to and those that aren't as privileged, and they need to have something that's nutritious offered to them.
I think that's a really great point. And I think a lot of people I've seen in comments and reactions to articles about this lawsuit say things like, just bring your own, or just bring your own alternative milk, or they're like, or they say, like, you can't make people go vegan, even though that's not at all the point of the article. But the point of this lawsuit too is to highlight that issue. It's not about just giving alternative milk to someone who wants it. It's about making plant-based options accessible to people who don't have access to them, so that they can choose. And I think that's something that I tried to emphasize a lot. But yeah, you're definitely right about that. It's a lot of people want to eat more plant-based. A lot of people don't want to eat animal products, and they don't have access to alternatives. And school is a place where students can have access to meals for free. And so they should be getting the full value of that free meal.
Yeah. Well, you make the best point. They deserve a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the lawsuit is about your First Amendment right for free speech. How I thought that was, when I read that, I thought it was curious that it wasn't broader, because what do you want to get out of this, I guess? Because Dotsie and you were talking about how it's important that kids have the ability to have soy as an option instead of dairy, but this sounds like a lawsuit about your ability to have a table at your school.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity to bring light to these issues. The Physicians Committee is incredible at, they've filed numerous lawsuits related to this issue, and they've done a really good job at taking these situations and using them to highlight a much deeper issue. And so that's what this is. Ultimately, we can't file for anything other than, free speech or viewpoint discrimination, because that's what this is, a free speech violation and viewpoint discrimination. But it's also allowed for, the media coverage has given me and Deborah from the Physicians Committee opportunity to talk about these issues, about equity and access to food and environmental damage and health, and of course animal rights.
I guess at the least they'll change that rule that you can't have any kind of anti-dairy messaging or anything that restricts the sale of dairy. Is that the point? Is that what you'd like to do if you win? Aside from obviously the great press that you're getting and able to talk about the issue. Yeah,
I think awareness was one of the biggest ones, or goals, I guess, should I say. And making sure that anybody who wants to criticize dairy, or in a peaceful, positive way, of course, because mine was going to be a tabling event where I have games and raffles, and I spread awareness, but make it fun and engaging for students, like I did in October. And so I think anybody who wants to do that should be able to do that for any issue, really.
In as much as you can, I'm assuming there's parts of the lawsuit or how it's going that you can't speak of, but I guess the question would be, what is your hope, and how are you thinking this might land, and what it might change. You just mentioned one of the hopes, but because you're in the thick of it right now, I would imagine, of the suit.
Well, yeah, like I said, changing that federal law, but also following the lawsuit, the Healthy Future Students in Earth Act was introduced. Not following, it was introduced, and it basically mandates that I believe schools participating in the National School Lunch Program must also provide non-dairy milk. That's not all of it, but that's the gist of it, if I'm correct about that, which I think I am. And so that would be ideal, that part of the attention generated from this lawsuit, I guess, encourages support for those kinds of acts. And also the Add Soy, is it bill, right? Or act?
Act, yeah, because there's
Yeah,
amendment to that. Yep.
Yeah, I've been following it, and like I added my name to it and everything.
Yay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
We got to move yours to the top. That's awesome. Do you feel like you're, I'm sure your answer is going to be yes, so I want to expound on it some. You just mentioned, just the harmful impact on the environment. Are your peers becoming more and more aware of that and afraid of the future, and the consequences of also for their health consuming a diet high in animal protein?
I think a lot of people my age don't really care about their health right now. So that doesn't appeal too much, but I think environmental justice does. But I think most significantly is human rights. But I think that as we see more of the damage of climate change over time, that will start to be more of a concern and more of an encouragement to eat more plant-based for my peers.
They don't care about their health because they think they're
invincible.
Yes, invincible, like Dottie and I did when we were your age. But they care about how they look. And I'm wondering if the fact that antibiotics in dairy and meat and all the estrogen in a pregnant cow's milk, or the fact that the milk is created for a species that goes from 0 to 600 pounds in 4 months or something, if that has any effect on them. Marielle, do you ever use that as when you discuss milk with your peers?
I think that it goes into what people see as diets, unfortunately. Like a lot of girls go gluten-free and dairy-free. And of course their skin clears up and they're like, I cut out dairy and this happens, but then it passes, unfortunately. But I mean, at least they get to see how helpful it is. And maybe it'll encourage them to do it for the right reasons in the future.
I'm curious as to how your desire to reduce and eliminate animal protein was received by your parents, which I'm gonna guess they're Alexandra's in my age, because we grew up on it, right? And we didn't question it, as we talked about earlier. How did they respond?
I think they're younger than us.
Okay, don't talk about it. That's depressing.
So I transitioned to a plant-based diet about 3 years ago. And my dad is incredible. He's a psychologist. Growing up, he would always mediate my arguments with my sister, and he's very, very open-minded. And so immediately I piled up a bunch of TED Talks. I showed him Game Changers. Cowspiracy, all these documentaries, and I actually went vegan when we were on a weekend trip in Idlewild, I think, which is kind of like Big Bear. And so the whole 5-hour car ride back, I was just playing video after video and TED Talk after TED Talk from my dad and having conversations about it. And it happened during the pandemic, and I'm really glad it did, because I was very passionate and aggressive at first. And he helped me make my response more, I guess, appropriate, like less angry and criticizing, and more just understanding and encouraging. And we're plant-based now for the most part. At home, we don't have any animal products anymore. My little brother takes every opportunity he can to eat animal products, but at home, my mom doesn't buy it for him.
Okay.
My sister, she's at UCLA. She was already in college when I was like advocating for that, but she's seen it at home, and now she eats pretty much all plant-based. She has health issues, and so she's taking courses to learn how to, eat plant-based, and she's studying nutrition. So it was a lot of tension and frustration at first, especially being French, growing up on that. But now things are much better, and now they're actually advocating for it to neighbors and friends and all that.
Good for you. That's and it's interesting because we mentioned that, obviously Eagle Rock High School is in Los Angeles, but you split your time between France and Los Angeles, and France is, I don't know, I'd say of all the countries in the planet is really, really known for dairy and cheese and butter and everything. Have you found a lot of great vegan spots there, or have you had a vegan croissant in France, or what? Tell me the scene over there as it relates to dairy.
It's definitely, when we're here, it's definitely more whole food, plant-based. So there's less alternatives. But today I went to a chocolaterie I'm in La Rochelle right now. Okay. And it's just all chocolate, little, chocolates, handmade, and it was all vegan. And it was pretty insane because I've never seen that before. But I mean, Happy Cow does a great job giving me. And then Paris has vegan cafes and croissant and all that. So yeah. And
that's amazing. And so you got all sugared up before the Switch4Good podcast is what you're saying. good girl.
Happy Cow, everybody, is an app that will help you find vegetarian and vegan restaurants, markets, and just places to purchase non-animal products. So definitely download that. So you're going to be using Happy Cow, we heard, this autumn. Tell us about your plans. You are starting college at Duke. Congratulations, but you're going to be in China?
Yeah, so about 10, 15 years ago, Duke opened a campus with Wuhan University in China. It's called Duke Kunshan University. And basically you spend all 4 years there, but you can do a semester in Duke's campus in Durham. So junior year. So I've been learning Mandarin for a couple years, and I'm really excited to be immersed in that culture.
Wow. And you're going to be there for at least 3 out of the 4 years. And is that right?
Yes.
And what are your plans for the future? How is activist Marielle going to express herself in college and beyond?
So because it's a relatively new and developing campus, I've been trying to reach out to different organizations in China and also here that have connections to people there. Ideally, I would want to get one of their upcoming restaurants to be vegan or at least vegetarian. And I'm going to be majoring in international relations and public policy and minoring in Spanish. And I want to go to law school and hopefully work on like international environmental policy, but focused on eating plant-based, because at the root of it for me is animal rights.
Wow, what a great future you have. And the future will be brighter because of you, Marielle, and the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for everything that you've done and that your current lawsuit and your plans for the future. You are an extraordinary young woman, and I'm so honored to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Me too. The world needs you.
Thank you.
Hey, folks. Okay, back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switch4good.org. That's podcast@switch4good.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the Switch for Good, please visit us at switch4good.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to Switch for Good. This is the future.